Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my Photography Masterclass. This is actually the pre-stream. This is that first couple of minutes before the stream where I'm starting something new where I stream not only the Photography Masterclass on Adobe Live, but I'm going to stream it also on my YouTube channel and maybe give you guys a couple tips up front or maybe do a bonus session at the end of the stream. So that way you guys get a little extra content for being on my channel. So again, today we're kicking off how to get started with Photoshop for beginners, whether you're a photographer or not, but just some of the things you should know as far as using Photoshop. So today I don't really have a bonus tip just yet, but just know that this is what I plan on doing from here on out each Friday. It's just kind of kicking the stream off either earlier than my traditional stream or stay a little bit later and give you guys a little bit more bonus content. So one of the things I can tell you that if you are a beginner to Photoshop, there are some reasons why you want to use it over Lightroom, and we're going to cover some of that today. We're going to cover a lot of cool things that you can do that are new to Photoshop, that are new in the latest updates as well. So with that said, we're going to kick things off in about, looks like 20 seconds, and we'll be back for how to get started with Photoshop in my Photography Masterclass every Friday here at Adobe Live as well as on terrywhite.tv. So with that said, catch you in 5 seconds. All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Great to be here doing my Photography Masterclass once again. And also happy to see so many of you popping in. Wow, looks like we have over 1,000 people watching already. So this is a kind of it's one of those topics that usually draws a crowd. It's how to get started in Photoshop. And even though this is a photography masterclass, I'm going to be approaching it from just how I would teach anyone how to get started in Photoshop. But I am going to talk about some specific photography features as well. So I see a bunch of people in the chat already. I see Steve, Howard Pinsky in the house, Marcelo, Sean, Paul Lee, Aaron, and welcome for people all over the world. Also, if you happen to be watching this on another platform, such as Facebook or such as my Twitter or YouTube, that's cool. You can hang out on those channels, but I'm really going to only be watching one chat because, I can only watch so many things at once while I'm also showing you what's going on. So if you want to participate in the chat, you should probably go watch it and head over to b.net/Adobe Live. You'll see it live right there on the page. Just use your Adobe ID to comment or sign in with your, to comment so we know who you are. But other than that, you can hang out where you are. You can head over to Adobe Live. It's totally up to you. So I see some folks over on my Facebook. Hey, Gustavo. Hey, Florian. But again, if you want to participate in the chat, head over to b.net/Adobe Live. All right, so we got a lot to cover because anytime you talk about Photoshop, there's a lot to cover. And of course, not a ton of time. We got like the next 52 minutes. So with that said, I'm going to get a couple of ground rules out of the way first. First of all, whenever anyone talks about Photoshop and there's a user in the audience that already knows Photoshop, they start to say things like, well, can't you blah, blah, blah. In other words, can't you do it this way? And what that tells me is you already know you can do it that way, but you're questioning why the instructor is doing it another way. And with Photoshop, unlike most other applications where there might be 1, 2, or 3 ways to do something, there's probably 50 to a million ways to do something. So just because you see an instructor do it one way doesn't mean they don't know the other way you're asking, or maybe they don't agree that that way is the best way, or they're showing you a way to do it. So with that said, just know you don't need to say, can't you do it this way? I already know, yes, you can. And you already know, yes, you can. So no need to say that, especially in a beginner topic. Because I could spend 52 minutes showing you 50 ways to do the same thing, and that's pointless. So there are lots of techniques to do the same thing. Pick the one that's best for you. I also see people say, well, this instructor said do it this way, and this instructor said do it this way. Same thing. Two people are going to have two different techniques. You've seen both. Use the one you like best. It's like a buffet. You go and pick the things from it you like, leave the things behind that you don't want. So now we got that out of the way. Second thing I'm going to talk about is that if you're going to be serious about Photoshop or editing in Photoshop or retouching in Photoshop, I highly recommend you get a tablet, a graphics tablet. Not talking about an iPad, which that could be used as a tablet, but specifically a tablet that will use a stylus as opposed to a mouse, trackpad, or trackball. Do they still make trackballs? Anyway, because this is going to give you pressure sensitivity and it's going to speed up your workflow in ways you can't imagine until you try one. Whereas the mouse is always on, off. There is no in between. So you're either doing 100% pressure or 0. Whereas this can be set to change your brush size, change the amount of flow, change the amount of whatever it is you're doing with it. So, and I don't care what brand you get, I don't care what you get, but you can even get tablets for $79 and they will work a million times better than a mouse in Photoshop. So I use Wacom, but you use whatever you want. And you can, and I'm not saying you have to have a tablet. I'm just saying if you're going to be serious about it, you want to think about a tablet. Otherwise, you can use a mouse. You can use a trackpad for everything you do in Photoshop, but you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so now that we got all that out of the way, we got the ground rules out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to switch to my desktop so you guys can see, what I'm going to be showing you. So again, if you're just joining me, we're just getting started with Photoshop, and we're about to head over to the desktop one last time. If you want to participate in the chat, if you want me to see your comments, I'm looking at the chat right here on b.net/Adobe Live. And I see people over there on the other YouTubes. Hello, Colleen. Hello, Roseanne. Hello, Terry J Photography. Welcome, everyone. But again, this is the chat, that one over there. That's the one I'm going to be paying attention to. Okay, so now let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to switch over to my desktop. And two things. I've got Photoshop open, which you know how to do that already. Just launch it. Once you launch it, I am already in the app, and you know what? Let's go to, I just thought about something I probably should show you. Let's go to, I'm trying to figure out how I can quickly get to it. What I want to show you is that if you were in the welcome screen, like I'm not in the welcome screen anymore, but in the welcome screen in the upper left corner is a little PS for Photoshop. Tap it to get to this screen. You don't have to do anything on the welcome screen. So your first tip is if you don't want to open a recent document, you don't want to create a document using that stuff, you just want to get into Photoshop, in the upper left-hand corner of the Photoshop icon, or Photoshop icon, or whatever icon you're in. Oh, thanks, Tim, the house icon. There we go. If you're on the screen, just click the Photoshop icon in the upper left corner, and that will take you right in. So you don't have to do something on that screen to get here. Second thing, the workspace when you first launch Photoshop is going to be the Essentials workspace. So the Essentials workspace is for beginners. It brings up the things and tools that the Adobe team, Photoshop team thought most users want to start off with. This is cool. You can keep working in this workspace, but because this is a photography masterclass, we want to probably head over to the photography workspace. So in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little box, looks like a workspace. I'm gonna hold it down, that's actually a menu. And instead of being on Essentials, I'm gonna head down to photography. But you notice they have a workspace for most kinds of things that people do. So if you're working with motion design, video, you have a motion workspace. If you're a digital painter, you've got a painting workspace. If you're doing graphic design, web design, you've got a graphic workspace. If you're doing 3D work, you got a 3D workspace. I'm going to head to the photography workspace just so we're all on the same page. Now, when you head to the photography workspace, that will also probably change your tools around again, because again, each workspace can now have a custom tool panel. So even when I go to my own workspace, wrong thing. Go to my own Terry White workspace. I have two, Terry White Retouching and Terry White. I go to my retouching workspace. It changes my panels, but it also breaks out a bunch of tools that I use on a regular basis, so I don't have to dig for them. So just keep that in mind. Workspaces can be very powerful to get started with and to help you find things you want. So I'm going to go to my photography workspace. That's where I want to be. And I'm going to go to the Adobe Photography workspace. That's where I want to be, so you can be in the same place. And typically, you're opening your images one of a few ways. You're either just going to File and Open and finding the image. You're on your desktop and you're double-clicking the image and it opens in Photoshop. You're dragging the image onto the Photoshop icon and it opens in Photoshop. Or you're in Lightroom. Let me go back to Lightroom. Whether it's Lightroom Classic or it's Lightroom, like the new Lightroom. And you're choosing to right-click and edit in Photoshop. So whichever way you do it, that will get an image over into Photoshop and open it up. Now, we're going to use this image in a minute. I'm going to close it for now. I'm going to open up another way. I have all my images that I'm going to work with in my Creative Cloud libraries. And it seems like every time I show libraries to a new user, they're always like, how did you get those images in there? And I always take that for granted because libraries have been around for years. And the way you get images into the library, you can either have an image already open. So let me go open up a different one, by the way. Let's go to Lightroom Classic. Let's go just open up a different one from the lake. Edit in Photoshop, Command E. And now if I want this image in the library because I'm going to use it over and over and over again, or I'm going to teach with it, I can click the plus sign and say add it as a graphic to my library. So once I do that, it's in the library now. I don't have to go back to Lightroom, never find it again. Every time I open up Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator or any other program that has libraries, those images will be there available to me. So libraries is just a way that I'm going to be getting my images. Now, another way, if you wanted to quickly populate a library, this is just a bonus tip. Right in the operating system, you could go to a folder of, let's say, 50 images. Select all 50 and drag them right into the library panel. And it will just add them all at one time. So you don't have to keep opening them one by one and adding them as a single graphic to put them in the library. Just another tip. All right, now on to number one, what we're going to do in Photoshop. We're going to try and get through 10 things today. So one of the reasons people go to Photoshop is they want to remove something from a photo, add something to a photo, composite something in a photo, or correct something in a photo, or add text. Those are lots of the same reasons we keep going to Photoshop over and over again. So for example, I've got this Adobe stock image. This is not one of mine, where we got this, I'm assuming, teenager based on the level of acne. We've got this teenager that maybe took a high school picture and they, they weren't having their best skin day. Now, should this teenager be punished for the rest of his life in his high school yearbook with this acne, since it's temporary and it will be gone by probably in a couple weeks or a couple months or whatever? No, and that's why we go to Photoshop, is to make, if we're working on people, to make them look the way they would normally look, to remove things that are temporary, to enhance a photo that maybe wasn't captured the best possible way, and we want to take care of it. All right, so now that I got this image open, we talked about all the ways to open an image. Now, as a beginner, you probably want a safety net. In other words, if I want to always go back in case I mess up. I don't worry about that because I've got the original image. As long as I don't save over it, I'm good. But for people that are new, you have this layers panel. And in the layers panel, every time you open an image, there's going to be at least one thing there. Usually it's going to be the background. Now we're going to get into layers in just a minute, but the background is the actual photo. So if I start doing anything on the photo, I'm physically changing those pixels if I do it on the background layer. So what a lot of beginners they get really comfortable with is duplicating that background layer, duplicating the background into a layer so they can work on a copy of it without having to worry about messing up the original. So to do that, one of the fastest ways to do it, you can do it from the keyboard, you can do it from the menu. Again, lots of ways to do it. One of the fastest ways is at the very bottom of the panel, which, if I get out of my dock, at the very bottom of the panel, there's a plus sign. And that plus sign, if I can get out of my dock, that plus sign, there it is, right there. That plus sign is new layer. We don't want to create a new empty layer just yet. We want to just simply drag the background down to that new layer icon, and it will create a copy for you. Again, lots of ways to do this. Now that we've got this copy, we can do anything we want to the copy because we still have the background that's going to be untouched. We're going to get to layers in a minute, so you learn more about layers. Now, I want to work with getting rid of these red pimples with a tool that I heard about. I heard there's a tool called the spot healing brush. So let's say I don't know what that tool looks like. I don't know where it is. Maybe it's buried. Maybe it's out in the open. I don't know. One of the things that was put into Photoshop quite a few versions ago actually, is a search. Not just a search for images, but a search for anything in Photoshop. So for example, if you click the little magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner, and I know there's a tool called Spot Healing Brush, or maybe I don't even know there's a tool, I can click search and it will bring up the ability to search everything Photoshop, learn content, stock photos, or your own Lightroom photos. So if I say, the minute I start typing spot, there it is. Spot healing brush or sponge tool or spin blur, whatever technique you're looking for, if you don't know where it is, you're a beginner, take advantage of the search because it will let you quickly find things. That's why they did it this way without you having to go around. Now watch what happens on the tool panel. I'm going to click spot healing brush, and even if it highlighted it in blue and it switched to it, to let me know, oh, there it is. I got it. Now I know that that tool is right there. I know how to get back to it from now on. I don't have to keep searching for it. I know what it looks like. I know where it is. Because sometimes in Photoshop or any other Adobe product, you can have tools that are, oh, hang on, escape. There we go. You can have tools that are buried underneath they're popping out over there. I'm like, why are my tools? So my tools are popping out on another display for some weird reason. So you see these little arrows underneath the tool to the right, that little down arrow right there. That means that this tool has more tools. So if I hold it down, normally it would pop out to the side right here, but it's popping out on another display. You would see the other tools. So whenever you are in doubt, you can either search or just hold down a tool to get to it. All right, so now I selected the spot healing brush. I want to come over here and start working on this pimple, and I noticed two things. That brush is really, really tiny. That's like a really small brush, and I could start using it, but it's going to take a minute to even just get rid of one. So I could zoom into the photo, and I'm sure there's a way to do that under view. Yep, zoom in. I usually use the keyboard shortcuts. And I could keep zooming in, I keep getting there, and it's going to take a minute. Or I could simply just make the brush bigger. So anytime it's a tool where you're going to paint or brush with it, it's got its own brush size, and you can make that size bigger. Now you can do it from the keyboard, but you can also do it up here right in the menu. There's size, and we can make the size bigger, and you could just keep dragging the size bigger until it's at least the size of the pimple, so you don't have to keep doing as much brushing. So I'll make it a little bit bigger than the pimple itself or the area that I'm going to affect. And now I just do one click and it's gone. So you can just go around your photo doing these one clicks to get rid of these. And it's just so much better than having to brush. And this is where a mouse is perfectly fine. Because again, I'm just doing one click. It doesn't need pressure. I'm just clicking and it's using the surrounding pixels to fill it in. Now there's more than one healing brush or spot tool, but this is the one I like to show beginners because there's very little effort. You basically just click, it will do the right thing using the pixels around it. Unless the pixels around it are the problem, then you might have to use one of the other tools. And get a couple there. Now in a case like this, we may not want to remove everything because he is a kid. So we're going to keep it the way it is, or just that much at this point. So now, where I did it on the background copy, the original is still under there. So if I temporarily hide the background copy by turning off the little eye in front of it, we see the original. There's the before and after kind of view. So you get to quickly see how much of a difference you can make with the, Sean's asking a question, with the spot healing brush. So Sean's asking, with the spot healing brush, how does hardness affect the results? Simply, okay, so what he's referring to is with the size of the brush, you also have whether the brush is hard, which means it's going to be like a solid round circle, or whether it's soft, which means it's going to be like more feathered. And simply just like it does in any other case, it's going to blend it in more. So whereas a hard circle might actually, depending on the surrounding pixels, create a circle on the image. Whereas with this, I usually use less hardness so that it blends in better. All right, so it just depends on the effect you're looking for. It also depends on the texture of the image as well. All right, so we'll get out of that. And you can even see it if I zoom in. See how soft the edges are around that? And by the way, even though I was just clicking, you can absolutely paint with it. So if I need to do a bigger area, I can drag. And that will blend in more by using less hardness. So just so you know that I was clicking, but you can absolutely drag. So where you might want to drag, let's zoom in on this area of the photo, is like if I wanted to remove one of these lines or crow's feet as they're sometimes referred to. Now, watch the difference. If I click and drag with a mouse, it's the full size of the brush. And that's okay, it did it. But if I do it with my stylus and I'm not applying as much pressure, the stroke is much thinner. So you can do much more detailed work. So let me undo that, undo. Now I'm going to press harder. If I press harder, I get a bigger stroke. So you are able to just quickly go back and forth, making things bigger or smaller, just by how hard you're pressing down on your tablet. And that's why I recommended a tablet to begin with. All right, so spot healing brush, tap, tap, a little hair there. Get rid of some of that. You could do wonders with the spot healing brush, or the spot healing brush. Now, some might say, well, doesn't Lightroom have a healing brush or a tool like this? Yes, it does, and it's nowhere near as good. For people that have tried it, this is going to be 10 times faster than trying to do it in Lightroom, because when you do it in Lightroom or Camera Raw, you click, and it guesses at a spot that's 50% of the time wrong, or not where you'd want it, and you end up having to move where it guessed. So this is just using surrounding pixels without randomly picking some spot somewhere else on the subject. All right, so that was using or touching up a photo, removing blemishes with the spot healing brush. All right, next up, let's go ahead and talk about layers and adjustment layers. We already kind of started that progress. So we're gonna close this photo. I'm not gonna save it because, you know, I could go back and do it again if I need to. Let's open up this photo. This is a photo I took a while ago. All right, so we have, like I said, every image you open is going to have a layer. It's going to have something in the layers panel, usually the background. And when I want to create more images on top of this, that's what layers are. So think of a layer as your photos on the bottom, and you're stacking clear pieces of acetate on top. So like, for example, if you had a photo and you put a clear piece of acetate down on top of it, and you took a magic marker and start scribbling on that acetate, are you affecting the photo? Usually not, unless you have some weird bleeding with your acetate, but you're usually not affecting the photo. So you could take the acetate away, the photo would be untouched. That's what layers are in Photoshop. So if I were to click create a new layer, now I've just got this layer called layer 1. And if I were to go to a paintbrush and I were to pick a color like, I don't know, blue since we're here, and I start brushing, I am now destroying my photo. No, I'm destroying that layer, or I'm just putting blue on the layer. So if I turn the layer off, photo's still underneath, turn the layer back on, I still see the blue, turn the background off, I just see the blue. So that's what layers are. So with a layer, I could go, for example, to an eraser. Let's get a bigger brush. And I can erase some of that blue. And I want to try a trick here. I erase some of that blue. Let's put some of it back, but I want to put it back in a better way. let's just make my brush smaller and just start adding a little blue here to certain areas of the photo and the B. All right, so now we know I'm just painting on a layer and I'm erased from a layer and none of that's affecting the actual photo. Now that doesn't look very artistic or creative because I just put solid blue paint on a layer on top of my photo. So again, just like we just did there. But with the layer, you also have layer properties. You have the ability to go in and simply change how opaque or how solid the layer is. Right now it's 100% of that blue. But if I were to click and drag the opacity, I could turn it down. I could say, well, maybe I only want 50% of that blue for whatever reason you were doing that. So layers, all layers have opacity. You also have the blending modes. So I can say instead of the normal solid blue, I could click on normal and just hover over each one and see how each one of these blending modes might affect my photo. So some of them it almost disappears. I can see parts of the blue in the base of the flower and the face of the bee. Overlay does that. Soft light does that. So depending on what you were trying to do, you might get away with just simply using a blend mode to affect your photo. So subtract does that, hue does that, so forth and so on. All right. Which one was that? Last one? I kind of like whatever that one was. All right. So hue. That's just simply applying the blue as a color to the photo, changing the original color to the blue. Now, in that case, I might say, oh, I kind of like what that's doing to the middle part of the flower, but I don't like anything else. So again, go back to that eraser if I want to, or we're going to talk about masking, but go back to that eraser, start erasing part of the blue where I don't want it. I don't want it on the B. And I just want it on that part of the flower. So I've actually just used a rudimentary way of changing the color of part of a photo just by, undo, smaller brush, just by painting in part of a color and switching the blend mode on a layer. So that's all you have to do. All right, so that's layers. Now let's talk about layer masking. So I'm going to turn off that layer temporarily. And let's say that we want to, we bring the butterfly over. All right, so we have two butterflies. We have one butterfly. Let's bring the butterfly over. Now these butterflies are coming in with their white background, and I also have two of them. So I just pull the image over. Now, let's say you didn't have it in a library. You could go File, Place, to bring over another image from your operating system. There's place embedded and place linked. You can have two windows open and drag one on top of the other. So there's lots of ways to get another photo inside. So that created a third layer just by dragging that in. It's my butterfly layer. I can switch to my Move tool to move it around. I can get these in place, and let's say I want that left butterfly up there. Okay, so now that I got the left butterfly up there, I don't really need the middle one. But I don't even want to erase it. Maybe I want to use it for something else. So what I can do on any layer is create what's called a layer mask. I want to hide parts of the layer, not erase. Because if I erase it, then it's permanently gone. I just want to hide it temporarily. So if I use the eraser, like I said, hang on. Hold on. Let's undo. Bad instructor. Let's do this. Okay, hang on. No, that was all my fault. Hang on. I brought that over from the library in a non-destructive way, and I want to be destructive now. All right, so let's try that again. We'll go to our Move tool, we'll move it around, we'll put it, let's say, right about there. And now, if I were to use my eraser and I start erasing, we'd start seeing through to the B. But again, I'm permanently erasing that other butterfly. So let's undo that. And instead, let's go to my layer that the butterflies are on and click Add Layer Mask. This box at the bottom of the Layers panel with a black circle in it. When I click Add Layer Mask, that adds a mask to the side of that layer. So here's the layer, here's the layer, here's the layer. But to the right side of that one layer, we now have this white box. So the way masking works is that white box is in black and white or grayscale. So when I add black to part of my image, it hides it. When I add gray to part of my image, it does it in various shades of gray or opacity. So it will be hiding, making it more translucent. If I add white to it, it brings it back. So if I go to my brush and I'm on black paint, which by the way, you can click to get to black this way, or you can just hit the letter D on your keyboard to get back to your default colors. Once I get to black, I can then just start doing the same thing as I was doing with the eraser. But in this case, it's not permanently erasing the butterfly. It's just hiding it behind that mask. So, and if I make my brush smaller, I can get into the details there. Here we go. So I'm hiding the other butterfly and the other part of that white background. Now, here's the problem though. We still have a white background behind the butterfly, and there's lots of ways to get rid of that. But one of the quick ways I've already shown you, we go back to the, so this is two icons now, so switch back to this icon. So see how you can toggle between the mask and the actual pixels. We go back to the, oh, and by the way, this is your actual mask. See where I painted black on it? If I were to paint white onto it, switch to the mask, and then switch to white, it brings it back. So it's not gone permanently. Just the black is hiding it, white is bringing it back. Now, if I go back to the pixel layer, or the pixel part of the layer, and I switch to a blend mode like multiply, then we're going to see a darker version of the butterfly, but we also get rid of the white. So you can play around with the different blend modes to kind of hide that white background until we learn how to cut it out. So there's a way to do that as well. Now, let's say that I kind of like some of these, but let's say that the blend mode dark or multiply is just making it too dark, and that's not going to, even though it's getting rid of the white, it doesn't do what I want. Well, there's another way to do this. We can make a selection of the white. So you have multiple selection tools. Well, in this case, I might want to even just simply switch to my magic wand. So the magic wand was buried under the fourth tool on the panel, under your selection tools. Now, what the magic wand is for is if you click on a color, it tries to select that color. So selecting all the white in the image. Now, again, keep in mind that it's selecting the white on the pixels themselves. If I hit delete, they're going to be gone permanently. But if I go to the mask now, and now that I got just white selected, remember how we were painting with black? When you make a selection in Photoshop, you're actually, Scott Kelby's in the house, you're actually protecting the rest of the photo. So remember, I clicked the magic wand and selected all the white. So that means the butterfly is not selected. So if I go with my paintbrush again, if I go with that black paintbrush and start painting, I'm not going to accidentally touch my butterfly because the butterfly is not selected. So this is just another way, and I'm masking, I'm not erasing. I'm masking out the white in that area so I don't have to worry about ever affecting the butterfly. Now, of course, there are little spots where it missed, and I can go in with a small brush and zoom in and get those details. But you get it. So the mask, painting with black hides things, painting with white reveals them. So, yep, previously known as a tragic wand. That's right. Sergeant Buck Logan in the house. All right, next up, let's, how do we deselect? We're used to, when you have any other applications and something selected, you're used to clicking off of it to deselect. But clicking off of it, unless you have the right tool selected, doesn't do anything. I just click down here with my brush. Clicking down here doesn't deselect. So a lot of users that are new to Photoshop get frustrated because they have something selected even somewhere else on the canvas. They don't even realize it. And then they can't do anything because that thing's still selected. There is a deselect command. I use the keyboard Command D or PC Control D to just do it quickly. But if you go to your select menu, there is deselect. So that will always get you out of a selection that you may not even know you have, but you're painting, nothing's happening. It's because something else is selected on the canvas that's protecting that area. So now if I deselect, I've just got my butterfly, and I can go in here and get rid of that little white there. And I'm going to zoom in because now that's bugging me. Get it? Bugging me. All right, we're going to use our brush, and we're going to make our brush super small. Now, you see me making my brush smaller. I'm doing it from the keyboard. If you have a US keyboard, next to the letter P, you have bracket keys. Open bracket, close bracket. Open bracket makes it smaller. Close bracket makes it bigger. All right, so that's how I'm doing it from the keyboard. So again, I'm just masking, getting rid of this little bit of white down here, using my stylus, which is pressure sensitive, so I can control how much I'm brushing without having to constantly change the brush size. All right, and if I press down harder, it will get rid of more of that white. There we go. All right, so now if I zoom out, there we go. Now we have our nice butterfly without the little white piece there. Next up, what if I want to move the butterfly now? Well, we already alluded to that with the Move tool. So I go back to the pixel layer. I go back to the Move tool, and I can pick it up and move it around. I can see where I missed white, by the way, or missed some of the white there. So that also helps me see. If I go back to the mask really quickly and go back to my paintbrush, and I make my brush super big, I can just get rid of all this extra stuff that's still left over. All right, there we go. Okay, now I just did a bad job on that. All right, so now that we got our butterfly kind of free from the other butterfly, free from the background, and there's lots of easier ways to do all of that, by the way, but just for beginners. I can now put the butterfly, more closer to the flower. And because it's a layer, it's on top of the flower. Keep in mind, we also had the blue, so it's on top of the blue. If I were to put it right here, it's not being affected by that blue. So now we're going to talk about layer stacking. So you have the background, you have we'll call it the blue layer, you have and I'm double clicking to rename these, by the way, the butterfly, I'm spelling butter wrong, butterfly layer. And you can drag these in the order you want. So if I want the blue to affect that butterfly, I can put the blue on top of it or put the butterfly below it. Now you can start to see how that blue is affecting the butterfly in this area because the butterfly is underneath that blue adjustment or that blue layer with a blend mode. All right, so now that we got that there, I can move this around. Now, what if I want to scale, make the layer bigger, make the layer smaller, flip the butterfly around, rotate the butterfly, do any of those things? All of this can be done with Free Transform. So Free Transform is going to be a beginner's best friend because Free Transform is like basically super select. Make this, not only select this so I can move it around, but make it so I can do things to it. So for example, if we go under the Edit menu, and we come down to Free Transform, which again, most of us use the keyboard shortcut, Command-T or PC Control-T, that will put a bounding box. Now, keep in mind, why did it put the bounding box way over here? Because it knows the rest of the butterflies, or the other butterfly, and the white background is still all the way over here. So you don't have to pay attention to that, but just know that's why the selection is so big, because it knows the rest of the image is still there. Now, if I grab a corner handle, and I'm not holding down any keys, it will proportionally scale this. And that's a fairly new feature as about a year ago. You don't have to hold down the Shift key anymore in Photoshop to scale by default. If I rotate it, I can rotate the butterfly and move it around. Ooh, I kind of like that angle a little bit better. I can make it a little smaller and put it where I need it to be. Now, you also have, here, let me rotate it back just for a second. As a bonus tip, you can right-click. Anytime you have a free transform, right-click, and you'll get more options. So you could flip it horizontally, for example. Now it's flipped the other way. You could flip it vertically if you needed an upside-down butterfly. You can rotate it by specific degrees. If you know what a traditional clock is, you can rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. There are kids that grew up with only digital clocks, which still stuns me. All right, we can flip it horizontal and get it back, and there we are. And we can, of course, rotate it and put it where we want. And then, now, how do you get out of this? How do you tell it you're done? Well, you used to have to either press Enter on the keyboard, click the check mark, but now you can also, if you can get away from the selection, you can click away from it if I can find a spot that's not rotating. But anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and click the check mark to tell it I'm done. None of this is permanent. I can always go back and keep working on it. All right, so we have our hue layer, and I can also still now see more of that white still peeking through, a job that's never done if I don't do it right. Let me go back to my black paintbrush. Let me go and make my brush smaller and just get rid of some of that excess white rectangle there. Okay, so that is a lot of things. That was masking, that was free transform, that was layer stacking. That was a lot of things in one quick segment. All right, I'm going to close this butterfly. I'm tired of looking at it. I'm tired of removing the white background. We're going to get into better ways of doing all of that right now. So next up, let's talk about cropping. All right, so we have a photo here I did in studio. The crop tool is, believe it or not, one of the most popular and most used tools in Photoshop. And it may sound simple because everything can crop now, like you don't have a photo editing tool that can't crop. But cropping is important. And cropping in Photoshop is a little bit different than most other programs. So first and foremost, when you click crop, you have, and mine is still set to the last thing I used. So let me go in and actually just clear it. There we go. So you hang on, let me get out of it. There we go. All right, so when we bring up the crop tool, it has a default ratio. And as long as you didn't type any numbers in, it will just be the size of the photo. You can go in and you can even specify a preset. So let's say I'm going to print this as a 5x7 or an 8x10. Then I can say, well, make the crop specific to that size. So if I need an 8x10, it's going to now constrain the crop to that size. But you're starting to see the problem. If I constrain it to an 8x10 aspect ratio, that would be an 8x10 when it's printed. Then I'm going to end up cutting something off. I can move it around. I can get her head, but then I'm going to lose part of her feet. I can maybe have a happy medium to where I cut off some of her hair, and I do that, and that's fine. And by the way, you can always crop in. So if you just needed a headshot, you can, of course, move the photo to where you're just getting the headshot. So if you don't need the whole body, that would be a compromise. And also, by the way, if you are dragging and if you're dragging the handles and you drag extreme in one direction or the other, it will flip the crop. So now it's a 10x8, just so you know. So you have that option as well. But in this case, let's say I need the whole body. I need the whole photo. So cropping to an 8x10 in traditional programs would not give me what I need because it's going to cut something off. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is Photoshop specific crop. Yes, you can watch this again later, Cynthia. I'm going to go to the crop tool again. I'm back on 8x10, 4x5. But there's something specific to Photoshop called ContentAware. It's normally off by default. Turn that on at the top of your options. Because if you have a background that's not too complicated, it doesn't have to be solid color, but as long as it's not too complicated, then what Photoshop can do is you can crop in, we already know that, but you can also crop out. So I can say, give me more space. Give me more of that. But wait, I don't want that white. Don't worry, because content aware in Photoshop means that it will figure out what's in your photo and automatically replicate it into that area of crop. So that gave me my 8x10 without cutting off feet or hair, and I have the yellow background replicated into this area, even with the shadow, like the subtle shadow in that area. If I'd done it on this side, it would match the light on that side. So content aware, again, doesn't have to be a solid background, but the background can't be another person or whatever, because then it would look weird trying to replicate that other person into that area. All right, so just know that cropping in Photoshop is much better than cropping in any other program. For that reason is that you can crop out of the image, not just in. All right, so let's go ahead and close that. And let's talk about the camera raw filter. All right. I'll open up a photo here and get out of the crop tool. All right, open up a photo here, and this is a photo I did in one of the previous master classes when we did a live shoot right as COVID was beginning. And in this particular shot, the color is off, meaning that this background should be more of a gray. Her jacket should be more black. It looks kind of light black, if that's a term. It just doesn't look right. So I could spend time going to Photoshop, looking under image and trying to figure out which adjustment I need, levels, curves, and all these other things. And these are all great. They're professional tools. They've been around for years. Professionals rely on them. But there's a much easier way for beginners now. It's called the Camera Raw filter. Think of the Camera Raw filter as that developed module that you love in Lightroom in Photoshop. So if you're in Lightroom, you would just do it in Lightroom. But if you're in Photoshop and you don't, like you just open up an image that wasn't in Lightroom, then you've got the same easy editing capabilities here. So if I were to go to the Camera Raw filter, I've got the ability to go to the basic panel, and I've got the ability to like change the exposure, for example. I can make it lighter, make it darker, do any of those things. But more importantly, I've got white balance. And white balance is one of the quickest, easiest ways to fix a color tone problem. So if I click the eyedropper, I can just come over to something that should be around 18% gray, which of course every photo you take is not like that yellow photo wouldn't have had any gray in it, or something that should be black or something that should be white. So this jacket should be black. It's kind of like grayish almost. If I click on the jacket, it fixes it. If I click on the gray background, it fixes it even better because it's gray. And even if I don't have something to click on to give me that one-click fix, you can still drag the temperature slider. If it was too beige, drag it to the blue, drag it to cool it off, to give it the right temperature, because this background was gray. So now I'm getting the right color. I like the new Jan, I like the new UI and the Camera Raw as well because it's more like Lightroom. These are the same panels in Lightroom. So if you learned it in Lightroom, you're good to go in Photoshop. And now if you learned it in Photoshop Camera Raw, you're good to go to Lightroom because you're going to have things in the same exact area. Now, once I click OK, that is a permanent change because I did not A, duplicate the layer, or B, create something called a smart object or a smart filter. But again, that's a slightly more advanced topic. All right. Next up, let's talk about selections because they're one of the most important parts of Photoshop. And selections have gotten a lot easier in Photoshop. And there's always new ways to make selections in Photoshop. So, Lisa sees someone at the door, apparently. All right, let's go in and, for example, you've got a bunch of selection tools. So let's say I need to select that, what is that, cantaloupe? If I grab the rectangle marquee tool, well, I'm going to make a rectangular selection. If we zoom in on that area, you'll probably be able to see it a little bit better. You get this kind of gray marching ant thing around it. Maybe I should pick something darker. Hang on, let's pick a darker part of the photo. All right, here we go. If I make this selection here, you get what you get. You get a rectangle. And that obviously is not the shape of that dish. So I can hit Command D to deselect. If I go to the elliptical marquee, there is one that pops out from that tool. And if I do it just right, I could probably get a good selection around it, but that's tricky, just getting the right starting point. So you're probably going to do that 3 or 4 times before you get it right. Any selection tool, you can do it from the center. If you knew where the center was, you can hold down your Option or Alt key and make your selection out from the center. So that might be a little easier. And even if you don't get it perfectly centered, you can move a selection after the fact. So as long as you're on a selection tool, you can kind of line it up better just by moving it. Now, it also required that the image be perfectly round, and it's not. So, or here, I should take that back. If I hold down my Option key and start dragging, then I hold down my Shift key, I'm making a perfect circle. So once I get the right size, which is about right there, then I can move it and kind of line it up. But again, this photo at this angle isn't perfectly round. So even that won't give it to me. Now we also have, we use Magic Wand. Magic Wand would take forever because I would keep, this isn't all the same color. So not the great tool for that. Underneath the Magic Wand is Quick Select, which is much better than Magic Wand because you can just drag. You can keep dragging until you get it all selected. So if I keep dragging long enough, there we go. I'm going to get it. Oh, I'm going to get it all selected. Oh, maybe I do want that. I'm going to get it all selected that way. So you can use the right tool for the right job. But my favorite new tool for making selections is the new, and I don't even know where it is in this workspace. Oh, it might be hidden. is the new Object Select tool. So let me find it here. I'm looking at a list of tools that aren't on the panel. I just don't, you know what? I'm going to give you the advice. I'm going to use the advice I gave you. I don't see it. I know it's in Photoshop, but I don't see it. So I'm going to bring up search. I'm going to do Object Selection Tool. There it is. Click, and there it added it. So it was in one of the tools. It was hidden from the tool panel in this workspace. But now with the Object Select tool, I have the ability to use a rectangle or a lasso. And if I use a rectangle, remember that same rectangle we used before that was kind of like silly? If I let go now, it actually figures out what the object is and makes the selection. Now, I still missed part of the shadow there, but it did most of the work for me. Now, so let's go back up to that cantaloupe. Whoa, 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 whoa. Same thing. If I grab my rectangular object select tool and let go, it just figures it out. It just does the right thing. Same thing if we go down here. If I want this cheese and I just say, oh, even though I'm selecting other things, it says, well, this must be the thing you're trying to select because it's the most prominent shape inside that rectangle. So object select, when you're trying to just get a piece of a photo, is amazing. All right, so now let's say I needed a copy of that cheese somewhere else. Remember, we're working on the background and we already know how to duplicate a layer, but let's say that we only want part of a layer. Well, I would hit Command J, but what's Command J? So let's go to our layer menu. Let's do New Layer via Copy. In other words, take what we just selected and make it a copy. Make it its own layer, like that. So now we have a copy of the cheese directly on top of the other cheese. With that layer selected, go to our Move tool. We can move that other cheese around. We already know free transform. We already saw that. So Command T, rotate it around, scale it down. Maybe not that small, maybe that small, and put it in place. So when you need to do things like that, that's where Photoshop comes in really handy. Okay, we got about 4 minutes left. Okay, let's quickly get through some other things. Let's close this. Let's go into this one. All right, so I got these ducks on a lake here, or these birds on a lake. I don't know if they're ducks. I got these birds on a lake. And we already know if I use my spot removal tool, I can get rid of one of them or get rid of both of them. But what if I want to move one of them? You actually have a tool called the ContentAware Move tool. So the ContentAware Move tool, you use it like a lasso. You use it like you're going to draw a circle around something. So I'm just going to use my lasso to make a selection around that one. Now that I made that selection, I can, I can now pick it up and move it. And also I want to make sure I have checked transform on drop at the top here. Now when I pick this up and move it, let's say this one should be in front and this one should be further back. I can pick it up and move it, but because I have transform on drop selected, I can actually make it maybe a little bigger. And ContentAware Move, like we used ContentAware earlier, does content-aware stuff. So if I click OK, it's going to not only remove the original, but put it in the other spot and also make it bigger all at once. So I just click the check mark, it's figuring it out, it does it, and then I can just deselect. So ContentAware Move is amazing when you need to just move things around in a photo while maintaining their background. Now, if I need to move it on top of the trees, the blue water on top of the green trees, probably not going to work out so well. So I might need another technique for that. But in a case where I'm just kind of moving stuff around or getting rid of things, ContentAware Move is awesome. All right, next up, let's close this. Don't save. Let's go into, all right, let's get into the thing that people want to do the most, and that is remove a background. All right, let's drag this over. Oh, let's open it actually. All right, and then we're going to drag this photo with a woman with hair onto it. Now, I used to have a technique that I would show you, and I'd spend time showing you how to do all this with select subject and select and mask. The new select subject, or let me back up. Select subject never paid attention to hair. The new select subject that's as of June knows what hair is now. So it's basically knows what people are. If I were to choose select subject under the select menu, select subject, it not only will select the person, but it does a better job of selecting hair. So now that I've got that, I can just add a mask, or I could go into the second part of this, which is selected mask, and it will show me that beautiful hair mask that it just made. And then I can say, oh, looks good to me. I'll put this as a new layer with a mask. Done. Now, there's a little part in here that I'd missed, so I could go back to that mask, double click, and go back into selected mask. There we go. And I can say, oh, you know what? I need to actually see this on a, maybe an onion skin. I can see the part where it's missing. Well, there's a refine edge tool, which is why we have selected mask, that I can go in and say, no, brush some of that gray out of her hair like so. Because it was inside the hair, that's why I didn't know what to do with it. All right, let's get these edges in these little pockets inside. Now I can click OK, and that will give me what I need. So cutting someone out from the background got 1,000,000 times better in the June update. And now that's another layer. I created actually 2 of them. That's another layer with its own mask. I still have the original layer. I have the new layer with a mask. I can keep working with the mask. I can do anything I want now. So select subject for portraits is amazing now. So much better than it ever was before. All right, I am out of time. The only thing we didn't do real quick was you can add text. So you can grab your text tool, you can click, and you can say, thank you for watching. And that becomes a layer. You can make it whatever size you want. You can make it whatever font you want. You can do whatever you want. Let me look at my favorites. And there we go. You can make it whatever color you want. So I can even use a color from the photo, from the green there, from the brown there, from the blue there, from whatever I want. And that becomes a text layer in Photoshop that you can turn on, turn off, lower the opacity, add a blending mode to, do whatever you need. So that was quick. It goes by fast, like I said. We're out of time, but I want to thank you guys for joining me on my masterclass once again. And that was a whirlwind. So stay tuned for the Daily Creative Challenge. You're going to get more Photoshop. The masterclass is all day today. You're going to learn other good stuff. I'm sure Paul Tranny, which was in the chat earlier, is going to do some Photoshop stuff. And Howard's going to do some XD stuff. And Jason's going to do some video stuff. So stay tuned for more. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.